Hey everyone, today I wanted to talk about one of the most important, yet one of the most overlooked components of a metal sound, and that is the bass guitar. When I picked up the guitar and for several years after that, I actually went from kind of not giving a rat's ass about bass guitar to actually thinking that bass guitar is boring and redundant in metal. This is because when I listened to metal tracks, I heard the guitars and to me they sounded heavy, huge, and just awesome. I also heard some sounds of the drums being hit to keep the tempo, and the vocals, and of course any keyboards or anything else that was there that were just trying to kind of add a little flavor, or at least that's how I perceived it. Sometimes if the guitar stopped playing, I'd hear the bass, but that's about it. So my overall impression was that, yeah, blah blah, you hear it all the time, the bass guitar connects the guitars and the drums and whatever, and I just couldn't hear it. So I came to the point where I was questioning whether metal bands need a bass guitar at all. Now some of you might be laughing at past me, while others might be thinking along the same lines. My misunderstanding came from the fact that I, like probably many others, have misattributed the sound of an overall metal mix. I have since come to realize the monumental importance of the bass guitar in metal, and I wanted to share it with you. It would be great to inspire some people to pick up the bass guitar as a secondary or maybe even a primary instrument, or at the very least to plant some seeds of appreciation for the instrument overall. So to demonstrate, I've written 3 very basic generic metal riffs that we're going to play around with a little. And just as a disclaimer, the tone and riffs here aren't meant to be great, they're just meant to demonstrate a point. So I've got Bias FX open here, and if you don't know what it is, it's just an amp and effects simulator plugin. And I've got a pretty simple setup, just a high gain amp with an overdrive pedal. So yeah, let's hear what that sounds like. So yeah, sounds, pretty heavy, pretty juicy. Obviously those are not the riffs that I wrote for this demonstration at all. That is the amazing band Gojira. Check them out if you don't know them. Amazing, right? But anyway, now let's hear the riffs that I wrote for this demo, and excuse me for the astronomical difference in quality between this and the Gojira riffs. So the first riff is an articulated, expressive style riff, and it goes like this. Etc. So the second riff is a trem picking riff a la black metal. Goes from being palm muted at the start to being open at the end. And the third is a simple chord bass riff, and it goes like this. So yeah, like I said, super basic, not very interesting, but hopefully it will serve to demonstrate my point here. Okay, I've recorded the whole thing, so let's hear what it sounds like with some drums. All right, so let's add some bass to it. I've got my bass here, and here's what it sounds like. Yeah, pretty basic. All right, so let's get the bass track for this recorded. Cool. Yeah, I guess that sounds all right. Okay, so it sounds pretty good with the bass in there, but to be honest, yeah, I think it sounds a lot better than without it there. But I do feel like the guitar's character doesn't really come through that much, and also whatever's happening in the low end of both the guitar and the bass guitar, it's a bit of a big mush, to be honest, right now for me. So you know what? Let's play around with the sound of the guitar a little bit. Here's the amp, so I'm gonna reduce the gain, reduce the bass, increase the mids, maybe a bit more treble and presence. Basically trying to give the guitar a bit more character, a bit more mixed presence, a bit more articulative quality. And let's hear what it sounds like. Yeah, I think that sounds a bit better. All right, so now that we've made that adjustment, what I feel from the mix is that there is a bit of separation between the guitar, which is now really full of character. It's really mid-present, and you know, it has a bunch of highs as well, obviously. And the bass is really, it's obviously hard to describe these things, but it's kind of, you know, far removed, I would say, from the guitar track in terms of its frequencies. It's very low. It fills the bottom end. Its transients aren't as peaky, you know, it's not as articulate, and it just kind of fills that layer, you know, just above the drums, let's say, or maybe even with the drums, and it just feels really far removed from the guitar. So I want to see if I can adjust the bass to close that gap a bit. Oh, and by the way, there's obviously a point to all of this that I'm doing. It's not just mindless exploration. So before I adjust the actual amp sound for the bass, I'm gonna first off start using the neck pickup, since I was using the bridge earlier. The tone was already on max, but it is also an active bass. It has a bit of a drive boost, so I'm going to engage that. All right, so now let's adjust the amp as well. Just going to give it a bit more gain, mids. Again, kind of blind adjustments, a bit more presence and treble. And obviously, because I've adjusted some parameters on the bass, I'm going to have to re-record the track. So I'll do that and I'll be right back with you. All right, there it is all recorded. So let's take a listen and see if it sounds any better. So yeah, I personally think it sounds a lot better. There is much less of a noticeable gap between, you know, the drums and the low end of the bass, and the whole transition to the guitar and the mid range. So yeah, and obviously, you know, this is really crappy quality. It's just to show a point on a very basic level. I don't know how to set up a good bass sound. I barely know how to set up an okay guitar sound, but that's just my demonstration of, you know, how I understand it to be, what I understand the bass to bring.
Okay, pause for a second. The point that I'm really trying to drive home here is the fact that by following this process of making the mix better, if this is what you're after, where it sounds more punchy, more clear, I guess leaves more of an impression, at least in my opinion, is that you're leaving space for the bass guitar to sit in. And the whole thing sounds better, and the bass guitar is more clear, it's more obvious, it actually offers something very, you know, perceivable to the mix. And the fact that that happens means that, you know, a bass player can appreciate what they do more, and everyone else can appreciate what the bass player does more as well, at the same time as making the overall mix better and allowing the guitars and the whole thing to do tighter riffs, where, you know, all the transients, where they're actually, you know, all the instrumentation has transients that land at the same time. So yeah, that's the whole point that I was trying to make with the build on the mix thing. But now, back to the video.
So this pretty much ties back into why it is I misattributed the mix of the sound in the past, thinking that the guitars sound huge, heavy, monstrous, filling the entire instrumental mix, when in reality it was actually the combination of the guitar and the bass guitar that sounded that huge. So of course this is really difficult to put into words, but the way I see it is that the guitar provides this mid-range articulated character that pierces through the mix with that recognizable pitched sound, while the bass provides this low-end, more subtle rhythmic melody that makes the whole thing resonate with the listener. So I would say that the bass guitar actually makes the heavy riff. Without it, the guitars would either sound just fizzy and empty, you know, a lot of mid-range and not very much bass. And obviously, you know, without bass, you could say, oh, we just fill in the bass, but then the guitars would just sound all over the place and mushy and not very distinguishable from the drums. The bass guitar basically fills in that place and allows the regular guitars to really deliver the recognizable, you know, pitched melodies and sounds that really sink into people's memories pretty much and perceptions. But anyway, what I suggest you do is just go listen to some of your favorite tracks by some of your favorite bands and listen to the bass, you know, see what it delivers. If you haven't already paid very much attention to it. And you know, a great band to start appreciation for bass with is Lamb of God. I really believe that Lamb of God's bass guitar is what really makes those riffs possible. It's because the bass guitar plays pretty much in all riffs every note that the guitars play, which means they can have these really, really fast riffs with a lot of notes in them, but every note, every beat of that riff is extremely clear, you know? It doesn't just become mush because the bass guitar isn't holding notes underneath, or, you know, it's very, very surgical, those riffs. So they sound both heavy, yet very, very articulate, so they have a lot of impression on you. Anyway, that's how I feel, of course. This is all you can say subjective, so... Oh, and one final point, which is actually definitely one of the most important points of this whole video, if not the most important, is that the whole thing I was trying to demonstrate is the fact that the sound of the bass carries not only a subliminal, unrecognizable, indistinguishable layer that is somehow necessary to the whole metal mix, but it is actually very recognizable, and you can definitely tell, you know, when you're looking for it, when you know what the riff sounds like, when you know what the guitar must sound like on its own, and what it sounds like with the bass, and what the bass allows the guitar to do. And sometimes, you know, a lot of times you can hear the bass quite clearly. But knowing all of these things, you know, yes, most people won't be able to tell what the bass sounds like. Most people won't look for it. Most people won't care. But the whole thing that I'm trying to show here is the fact that actually the bass, even when it's playing the exact same notes as the guitar is playing, which is, you know, most of the time, but not always, it still brings so much to the table. So in every case, bass in metal definitely deserves appreciation. But yeah, thanks very much for watching me ramble on. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that was somehow informative or inspiring. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of the points made here. And if you did enjoy this video, please do leave a like, that helps. And yeah, consider subscribing also if you enjoyed it.